Won't approve my purchases? Okay, I can work with that. I was a one-man IT shop at a small manufacturer. I had been there for years. I was actually the third employee ever hired, and now the company was like 120 people. I was very frugal, but in smart ways. I got a lot done for little money and always was looking out for the company. The owner recognized and respected this. Anyhow, we had gotten big enough where I didn't report to the owner anymore, and I was assigned to report to an inexperienced accountant who got her degree from some sketchy online school. She was going to change the world. I used to be able to just buy anything I wanted because the owner knew whenever I asked for a company credit card that I had already done my homework and it would be good for the company. Well, now, if anything was over $500, I had to go through this process with her to justify it. It wouldn't bug me except that she had no real business savvy or common sense. It was just painful to me to try and explain the most obvious things to her and she would fight it. Just because of power tripping or something. Example. I was trying to justify having at least one computer loaded up and ready to go as a hot spare for when someone's broke. She balked at having $1,500 sitting on a shelf unused. I tried to explain that about once a month someone's computer would break. All she could see was the $1,500 sitting unused most of the time. She couldn't understand the real cost of a broken computer. That the person could no longer do their job effectively. Parts not getting ordered. Jobs not getting expedited. Emails not getting returned. Me having to drop everything to react to this situation. Overnighting in parts. The true impact cost to the company was several hundreds of dollars every month. She couldn't see that having a spare would pay for itself in half a year or so. After a half an hour of fighting over this, I had an epiphany. I handed her requisition approval forms to her, told her she was right and left. Any purchases under $500 didn't need any approval at all. Now nothing I ever bought was over $500. I didn't buy a spare computer. I bought 3 as parts and assembled them into computers, servers, network storage. Why justify to a bean counter who wouldn't understand anyway? Just buy more parts and assemble yourself. Dual monitors for everybody. Bought one at a time. Bite me, Charmaine. Explain to her that toilets typically have less than 20% usage. But when you need one, and when Charmaine's computer finally breaks, tell her, sorry, we don't have a spare PC ready to go, so you'll have to wait while we fix this one. Should take about 5 to 10 days to get your computer working again. Shouldn't affect your productivity, right? I'm sure your supervisor will understand. I ran an engineering team at a school. We had advanced to the point we needed multiple computers. One for presentation work, one for research, one for CAD, and another to run the CNC machine we bought. I was extremely frugal with the money my team raised, grants we acquired, donations received. When it go to buying the computers, the system had a mandate we had to purchase computers through a company that sounds like hell. The cheapest refurbished computer with the specs to run the CAD software we had was $800. I could deal with some of the others being of lesser quality, but that had to be a good one. All told, I needed about $1,500 worth of computers and my budget wouldn't do that. I had an idea. Talked to tech guy and asked if my team could build some computers as projects. He said that was fine. I asked what we could do with the computers after we built them and he said we could use them. So I spent about half the amount and got the computers I needed with better specs than the refurbished hell computers. The system had an extra Windows license and donated it to us, and we loaded Linux on the other 2. Had a local IT guy come in and lead a computer building workshop for my students. Wins all around. That was about 10 years ago. I work for a company that sells books to schools. One of the districts has a policy that no purchases of more than $200 can be put onto the school credit card without an excessive purchasing process that librarians, school admin can't be bothered going through. For most of the books, we are either the only supplier, the cheapest, or just have the stock available. We have purchases from almost all of their 1,500 schools, and the most common order total is $185 to $199.95. Some school librarians will have 3 or 4 purchases of that same amount in a day. Our company know that the schools have just complied with the district policy. But damn, it's annoying. We've spoken to the finance people at the education department, but they are adamant that they don't need to change their policy, as rarely do schools request to purchase more than $200 of goods from your company. If they ever properly looked at it, they would see that they pay us a few $1,000,000 each year. My wife is limited to $3,000 on her company card, but quite often things are over that, and it is a long process to get the purchase done, which is a huge waste of time. She decided many of the expensive things she needed were at the big Costco by us, so she just started to buy everything on her personal Costco credit card and then asking for a reimbursement, which they never question as long as there is a receipt. Now we get huge cashbacks as they are using our card. My company gave me a Cooperate Amex that has a $180,000. So I'm told, limit. I go through the PR process until I get pushback. If the items are needed, I basically tell them to pound sand, I'll use the card. This is very frowned on by executive management. I've been tested twice. I used the card twice. Procurement hasn't pushed back in over 5 years since. Fuel for an on-site generator is not something that should be neglected when we are heading into the second big snowstorm of the season. We depleted fuel during the first, and we had another coming in a few days later. It's not a hard argument to a VP. My IT director made up a spreadsheet with the cost to recover different IT services in different timeframes. You can't be without your laptop more than a day? That'll be $3,000. You only want to agree to $500? That'll take 2 weeks. He presented in a meeting with all managers in front of the plant manager, and all managers had to sign off on the dollar amount they would agree to. No more bitching about cost or time. Plus, IT budgeting was much easier. My dad did a similar thing. He was an engineer that occasionally went out to airfields. He wore a collared shirt to work every day as required. Once, out looking at a plane, oil dripped and ruined his shirt. They refused to reimburse him for the new one he bought to replace it. He was pretty pissed off about it because, well, how petty, right? He then put in for several reimbursements for things under the threshold for needing receipts. He didn't do it for more than the cost of the shirt. He got the shirt paid for. Done. I suspect she would use the argument that anything of that dollar value could be considered capital equipment and needed to be charged to a specific department. Not that she's wrong, but for sure short-sighted. Your argument is sound, but trying to explain that to a non-IT person is like trying to teach a pig to sing. It's a waste of time and it annoys the pig. Don't worry. She'll change her mind when it's her computer that's down and she has to wait. Petty tyrants. My wife used to work at a bank as a lender where her personal limits to approve loans without seeking higher authority was almost 7 figures. She transferred to an admin position and needed to get approval to buy a stapler. My company uses an accounting firm. The accountant assigned to us deals with the bigger picture stuff. And then they have other people who do some grunt work. The main accountant told me one of these people doing grunt work would spending 2 hours chasing a 2 cents discrepancy. He's like, "You can't do that. We have to bill the client for the time you spend doing work on their account. Just write it off if it's small enough." Nicely done. We had the same thing with travel. Use the company travel. Travel badly, but lay out no money. Use your own card. Travel well, and get reimbursed. We just used our own cards, collected the miles and points, and got reimbursed within 2 weeks. Only idiots would use company travel. My reaction would have been to use the old April Fool's trick of switching the mouse connectors to an adjacent computer and wait for her to come running asking for help. But this is 100x better. I was expecting her computer to go down and you to make it excruciating for her as you took weeks to replace it. I was hoping her computer was going to break and she'd have to wait a week for the parts to come in, for her to be able to work again. I would have given her enough rope to hang herself. Don't buy the parts. User's PC shits itself. Sorry user. Jane from accounting won't fork out $1,500 for a spare PC for situations like this. Maybe let your manager know? I'll ask Jane what to do. I worked for years at a large Australian company 3 decades ago. About 5K employees. At one stage our IT manager resigned, and to fill the void temporarily they assigned the head of accounting department as temporary head of IT too. And it was a disaster. If you wanted something cheap, floppy disks, network cable, a mouse, we had cupboards full of them. Several hundred floppies, dozens of mice, dozens of cables. But if you wanted something expensive, you couldn't get it at all. It would never get approved. Now, this was back in the time of the 386/486%. Back then, computers were changing rapidly, going from 10 MHz to 200 MHz in the space of a few years. If your laptop was out of date by a year, it would be slow to run the latest software. If it was out of date by 2 years, you might not be able to run it at all. At the same time, the business was rapidly expanding. And I mean rapidly. I worked there for 13 years. In that time we went from having 30 outlets to more than 480. So our computing needs were rapidly expanding too. Not just laptops, but mini computers used to run the entire company's back end at head office. So IT would put in requests and they were always denied. Especially if they were expensive. When they eventually requested an entire refit of the IT room, new mini computers and upgraded systems, coming in at millions of dollars or more, it was of course denied, and denied, and denied. After several years of this, our systems were rapidly approaching breakdown point. In the end, the accounting chief was fired, not just as being head of IT, but as head of accounting too. And they got an actual IT manager who immediately authorized and arranged the upgrading of our systems. I remember one of our IT guys complaining about the old accountant. He knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. That quote always stuck with me. Reminds me of when I was the team lead of a trade floor IT team. It was me and 3 other guys. We had a system of always having at least 3 working golden stocked grand setups. Everything monitors, multiple Bloomberg keyboards, Z640s fully decked out, which honestly wasn't even that much if not enough. Other places I worked had at least 10. We would go through them at a reasonable rate and would replace them through warranty most of the time, but that contract ended with HP and now there was a new IT accountant in the CIO's office that didn't renew that contract or line up another one. So we started ordering equipment and raising requests. The first came back rejecting the requests exactly the same way you had it. Why do we have £10,000 sitting in a cupboard? So I explained in an email kindly that we keep it as golden hot swaps to ensure that if any trader machines go down that we can replace them immediately through the warranty, so it wasn't really costing us anything, but now that has ended we needed equipment to replace them, and the new agreement is to buy Lenovo equipment that was going to be all new and none of that was breaking. Doesn't mean we didn't have 300 other trade machines. We were going to buy that equipment anyway, but we were just being proactive to help people continue to work. Anyway, it got to the point where we had no golden stock left and we were ordering equipment that took 2 weeks to arrive. Well, to the point of the story, we had a secure room for LIBOR back when that was a thing. Well, there was 4 workstations in the LIBOR room and 3 were actively being used. 4th one was on maternity leave. Well, a water main broke above the room and of course soaked everything. Yay. We aren't allowed to let the LIBOR team work outside of a secure area, so we put them in another secure meeting room and gave them 3 laptops we had from the recycling bin. We immediately got hit with, "WTF is this? Why don't we have replacement workstations?" Quote, I informed them that new equipment takes 2 weeks to order and we no longer hold golden stock due to cost. The head of a trade desk obviously found out in about 5 seconds and walked himself into the CIO's office. Not sure about what conversation happened, but I'm sure it went along the lines of, "I have no LIBOR desk right now and I'm losing millions because you want to save a few quid?" Quote, head of trade desk then came to me and gave me his Amex Centurion card and said to call the concierge service and get him 20 replacement machines now. I did just that. Bill came to a lovely £110,000 courier, dropped off the equipment in 3 hours. Absolutely blown away at how fast they managed to get that many machines. Installed them straight away. Let's just say we never didn't have golden stock from that point, and some hard lessons were learned. Should have sabotaged her computer. This wasn't malicious enough for me, lol.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.